Kia ora koutou, everybody. Ko Grace Shelley, aho. I'm a writer, a teacher, and the editor of queer literary journal Overcom, and I'm so pleased to be joined on stage by this esteemed group of writers during this really wonderful festival of queer literature. I am joined by Ray Shipley, performance poet, writer, and comedian. They were a Billy T Award nominee in 2019, and they have won the Christchurch Poetry Slam 4 times. I personally find them one of the funniest queer people around, and I was delighted to be witness last night to your hilarious reading about leaving the Anglican Church. As a former Anglican myself, it resonated so much with me, from the mention of the empty front row to the continued love of song and ritual long after you've left the church. We also have short story writer Anthony Lapwood of Ngāti Ranginui, Ngai Te Rangi, Ngāti Whakaue and Pākehā descent. His excellent debut short story collection, Home Theatre, was released last year and was recently longlisted for the 2023 Ockham Book Awards. Just before I read Home Theatre, my friend Jordan said to me, he's aware that science fiction is not my usual genre of choice, and he said, I don't know if you're going to like it very much. It's a bit science fiction-y. And then the whole time through reading it, I would be messaging him late at night saying, oh man, I really like this book, eh? And finally, we have Freya Daly Sadgrove, a writer and performer from Te Whanganui Atara. She is the engine behind legendary live poetry event Show Ponies, and poems from her incredible first poetry collection, Head Girl, have been part of lesson plans in more than one of Takapuna Grammar School's Year 13 classes. Although in class I'm not allowed to say the full title of the titular poem, Head Girl poem, and I also won't say the full title here because my parents are here, and I think I would like them to go their whole lives without hearing me say the C word. So welcome to all 3 of you. So we're going to begin with a short reading from each writer, starting with Ray.
Hello, lovely to be here. I'm going to read a little poem, if that's all right with you, because I thought it would be weird to do stand-up in this environment. I will say that it is meant to be funny, but I feel like it's a bad start if I have to tell you that. It's called My Body is a Horror Film, written, directed, produced by and starring Ray Shipley, which is me. Good. Oh, the dreamlike romance of the opening scene of My Body, the foreshadowing soundtrack, the suspecting viewer. Oh, the turn of the century lonely manor on the moor of My Body. Weeping women who cannot sleep mope around the haunted rooms of My Body. Cobwebs linger in the angles of My Body. Oh, I am poisoning drinks. I howl at the moon. And oh, My Body navigates a grueling terrain in a slow drama thriller in which my companions and I are slowly developing a deep hunger that we can do nothing about. Oh, I am turning on myself. I eat my own limbs. Oh, the flickering glow on the dark highway of My Body. The clever, clever, clever joke of My Body. The roadmap is out of date. There are dead ends everywhere. I accept a ride from a stranger with an axe in the back seat. Oh, My Body is an ocean at dusk, and also the abandoned diver. I am waiting patiently in an ocean of My Body for rescue, but rescue is a cruise liner hundreds of thousands of times the size of me, and I cannot climb aboard. Oh, I am crushed into whale food against its pointed bow. The sharks are circling, and oh, My Body is an abandoned hotel, and every room is absolutely a trap, a torture device behind every locked door. Oh, I kick and claw at the mall in hope of an exit. My blood is electric and truly all over the show. And oh, it is night, and the babysitter is watching television quietly, and there are soft footfalls on the stairs, and a child's shadow is transforming into something alien and dripping and grotesque. And oh, the audience knows everything about My Body before I know myself. Oh, the spooky circus of My Body, the contortion, trapeze artist, terror and skill of My Body, the magician's illusion coffin of My Body. I wait and I wait and I wait behind false doors and in trick closets for my big reveal. Thank you.
Great, Anthony.
Is this on? Can you hear all right? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, thanks, Freya. I appreciate the advice. I was going to read a couple of pages from the longest story in home theatre, which is called Provided With Eyes, Thou Departest. I don't need to know much going in apart from that it's about a high school science teacher whose wife vanished a little time ago. The resumption of school after the summer June went missing had promised the return of structure and purpose to Bryce's days. But while that promise had been fulfilled and the days were easier, routines may only reorganise reality and not replace it. In quiet moments, Bryce had felt his grief pushing against the inside of his skin. Then one day, hunting amongst the shelves of equipment, searching for the razor kits, Bryce had begun to shiver. He was crying when Jackson stumbled into the room with an elbow pressing down the lever handle and a foot pinning open the door, arms loaded up with the circulatory model he was seeking to return. The two men had stared at each other in shock. Bryce registered some dismay as Jackson roughly deposited the model on the floor. The larger, younger physical education teacher had then grabbed Bryce, and with his nose flattened against a firm pectoral muscle, the muskiness of the neighbouring armpit in unexpected comfort, Bryce had wept for several minutes. He'd preferred that it was Jackson who found him in the supply room, and not one of his immediate colleagues. There was solace and safety offered in the moment, but afterwards no expectations or awkwardness. The men remained independent of each other. Jackson had, however, come to June's wake. The fake wake. That was June's brother's clumsy joke. The police had been clear in setting everybody's expectations. No one lost hope entirely, but as more time elapsed, other possibilities gained better odds. There wasn't much to go on, said the police. There had been June's car near the entrance to the hiking trail, and there had been 2 or 3 possible early sightings, and there had been some evidence of a campsite. Then there had been nothing, and no body. After 4 slow, painful months passed, his brother-in-law encouraged Bryce to hold a small ceremony. Not the real deal, of course, more of a, oh dear, to help everybody along in the process of mourning. But were they mourning if nothing had been confirmed? Some form of healing, they agreed, was required. Naturally, a fake wake suggested the same thing as the real deal, and just as naturally, the absence of a body raised a few questions and a few eyebrows. Bryce's desire for privacy was interpreted by some in June's family as a need for secrecy. He had always been a head-scratcher for them, being the quiet sort, whereas June was considered more outgoing. But they were both quiet people, Bryce knew. June was simply better at hiding her preference for solitude. In the end, even fewer members of June's family attended the wake than Bryce had anticipated. Bryce's 2 sisters and brother gathered together in one room for the first time since their father died a year after their mother. At first gave their condolences, then drinking steadily, proposed several upsetting reasons for optimism. From school, the head of science and several colleagues attended. And then there was Jackson, who came alone and made his excuses politely but promptly as soon as the speeches were concluded, as did most of the other guests. Thanks.
Thanks, Anthony. Are there any children in the audience? Can I swear? That's my question. Because it's hard to find poems in here that don't have swear words in them. And that aren't disgusting. This poem is called One Less Place I Can Put My Dick Into. It's not like no one's ever referred to their dick as vitamin D before, but it worked embarrassingly well on me. Like, yeah, alleviate my depression, baby. Give me that simple solution. Exercise, sleep, Brazil nuts, and dick. You are so kind, the way you accepted me for who I am. Like, you can kind of pull off mouth herpes. It kind of fits your aesthetic. And you are so clever to have thought of sticking a kick me sign on my back when we were kissing. And you are so good at jokes. Like when I said, I love you, and you said, I love scratching my big balls. And aren't I so ungenerous? Yeah, haha, plot twist. You're actually not the villain. It's just so easy to paint you in a really bad light. Like so people can literally barely see you. Sorry, baby. What else can I do? Really, our narrative has been tolerable, almost charming, like the past or a primary school rock band. And I wish everyone knew the diverse ways in which you saved my ass. I tell you I'm trying to undo everything I ever said about you in one breath, and you laugh and ask if I can attach a handsome photo of you too. I wish I had the stranglehold on language that I pretend to have, but my mother tongue is a massive museum of failures to express love, and I'm just on a class trip making sketches for high school art. Language laughs at me, not the other way around. So there is no beautiful way to tell you how beautiful you made me when I was attempting to curb stomp your emotional availability. I wanted much more than what you could give. You thought it was love, what you weren't managing to do, because that's what I told you. But in fact, it was hate. It was hate that I wanted. Thick, luxe hate. The kind you can only do to someone who means everything to you, which is to say, the kind only I can do to myself. And I'm sorry, baby, you couldn't help. Depressing.
Thank you so much, all three of you, for those wonderful readings. So, the title of this panel is We Are All Writers, and given that, I thought we would start, it's claiming that there's no right or wrong way to be a writer. So I thought we'd start by finding out about each of your journeys to becoming a writer. When did you start to write? Do you take significant gaps in your writing, or are you always writing? And when did you start to think of yourself as a writer, if you do? I know that, even the three of you with the, acclaim that you have as writers might still succumb to the old imposter syndrome. Any thoughts? Freya?
I do take big breaks because every time I write a big piece of work, I become empty inside, and then I need a long time to recover. But I've been writing little poems since I was a wee child. They used to be about bacon and like shopping, and now and now they're different. I went away for it for a bit, and then I had a really dope English teacher who reignited my passion. So I guess it's always been a thing I've wanted to do and have done with my hands.
Likewise, it's always been a passion. It's kind of been something that the general flow of my interests has always led me towards, which is another way of saying it's a kind of sickness that I've never managed to shake off. I think when I've stepped away from writing for whatever reason, usually something practical to do with resources, which might be relatable to some of you, it's always ended up coming back to sort of sit in my gut like something that won't be moved or ignored. So I kind of have to keep writing. I'm kind of always writing. I'm often writing notes or ideas or sentences or edits kind of as draft emails to myself. I'm pretty sure there's a notes app I could be making more productive use of, but that's the habit I've fallen into. So I have actually managed to sort of confirm discard in Gmail draft before, which is not something I recommend. I used to just think of myself as a scribbler, someone who scribbled, and then I read something, I think it was by the writer Neil Gaiman, who I really admire, who said that anyone who writes is a writer. And it's kind of that simple, and that was really eye-opening for me because it kind of gave me the permission to take this weird little hobby more seriously and to give it the kind of focus and attention that it deserves. And I kind of think that nothing really engages the psyche or the soul like writing does as an activity. And I think anyone who's sort of brave or sort of foolish enough to take up writing as a hobby or an interest or a profession should have that bravery kind of recognised by seeing themselves as legitimate as a writer. I think if you're willing to do it, then that's what you are.
Writing's always been a thing that I thought that I had to do in secret a bit because when I was growing up, my mum's kept a diary since she was like 13, and so in her like wardrobe there's a massive crate of like a diary for every year of her life since she was like 13, but that was like something that we could like look at but never like touch or like read. And then occasionally after she'd had like a few wines, she would be like, tell me a date, and so we'd just sort of shout like our birthdays but like 10 years before we were born or whatever, and she would like veto it, like read it through and then read out us like little snippets. And I always wanted to be like her, so I was always writing as a kid, but never like sharing it. I thought that it was like a very secret thing. And then with stand-up, I think my relationship to that was really odd because I never called myself a writer or like what I was doing was writing because I never wrote it down anywhere. I just told those stories so many times that there was a script, but it didn't exist physically anywhere, so I couldn't call it writing. So yeah, but now I feel like that's changed a bit, and now I'm like a bit more bold in calling it like, oh no, that's writing, that even if it just exists as a story that I know so well that I've never had to put it anywhere, it's still written. Yeah.
Cool, that's great. Just Freya talking about the poems that you wrote when you were little just suddenly brought back this memory I didn't know I had of the first poem I ever wrote, which went, I pull flowers out of my hat because I am a vicar. I do not pull flowers out of my hat because I am not a vicar. Which is hilarious because vicars don't regularly pull flowers out of their hat. Thank you. Thanks so much. I should publish that somewhere. Do you think that writing is a talent that you're born with, or is it something that anyone can do? Anthony?
I think people have aptitudes, like singing or dancing or sports, all of which I'm extremely bad at. But if you keep at something for long enough, it's amazing kind of what talents can emerge in someone. And I think the biggest thing with writing is just to keep doing it and keep going and keep reading and read widely, and get really good at noticing things would be the biggest thing that I would recommend. I think getting good at noticing things in the world around you and getting good at noticing things in the worlds that you're creating, because each thing that you notice is kind of a new opportunity that you can build on. I think that's the biggest job, and the biggest thing that defines you as a writer is the things that you notice. So I would say practice looking.
I had such a cool thing to say, and it just flitted away from me. It wasn't that cool. I've just remembered. I don't think you can be born with it because no one writes good stuff when they're a child or a teenager. I think you only get good by practicing. I think you probably are born with, aptitudes or sort of personality traits that lend themselves to, sensitivity to other people and to what's around you. I think that's the germinating thing, but I think anyone can do it. I don't think it's genetic. That'd be weird.
I agree. I think both of you have said that better than I would have. But I like the noticing thing.
We're all writers.
We are all right, even me.
I think. Oh my God! Yeah. I think I wish more people wrote, actually. I think writing's a really healthy thing to do, whether you're doing it, pen and paper, laptop, or whether you're doing it orally, just telling yourself stories, and that kind of habit of noticing and that habit of reflection that comes with having to actually think about something and to see it through. I think, I wish we really were all writers.
Yeah. So, Freya, your book, Head Girl, includes material which is deeply personal, often told in ways that are at the same time irreverent and devastating. How do you decide what parts of your life to draw inspiration from and what to leave alone? And are there parts that you won't touch on?
There aren't things I won't touch on in the way that, like, I feel like you're suggesting, as in things that are like too dangerous to touch. Those things are always what I end up writing about. The things that I don't write about are the nice things generally, or I don't know. Like at where I have been so far in my life is mostly needing to write about difficult stuff I'm experiencing to work it out, which I think is not uncommon. But yeah, in terms of deciding what to write about, it's not. I don't think it's that conscious a decision. It just announces itself as a thing that I need to dig into. But yeah, it's. I was just like, reading my book now does bum me the hell out. I still think it's funny and fun, but I'm also like, God, I was in a rough place, in a piece of shit relationship, and I feel bad for my past self. But I'm also glad that I did kind of work it out, because also I think that writing the book was a big part of the process of realizing I was in a situation I needed to remove myself from, which I didn't realize that's what it was until after I had been forcibly removed from it. But yeah, I think there's not much I won't touch, apart from my mum. She doesn't want me to write about her. So if people are like, don't write about me, I'm like, fine. She does come up a bit, but I'm not allowed to say anything too specific. She's very different to me. Yeah. That's,
Yeah, that's. I mean, I think that feeds into what Anthony was saying about how like everybody should write. It's a really good kind of opportunity. I think it's cathartic to write. I'm just interested, based on what you said, when you were writing those poems that eventually helped you figure out the situation you were in, were you writing them just for yourself to get it out, or were you conscious of writing for an audience?
I think I'm always writing for an audience a bit because of my personality. But also I think partly I was writing them to my partner. Like, I also thought a lot of them were love poems at the time. I thought they were like beautiful love poems, and that love was a terrible, bad thing. But in fact, that is not the case. I'm now a couple of months after the book was published, I got into a really wonderful relationship. She's over there. Yeah, and it was pretty funny at the start of the relationship, because I was like, whoa, this is wow, a whole new world. And it turns out, boy, it was my bar low. But yeah, it's also a thing where I haven't written many poems in the last few years because I don't feel awful all the time. Yeah.
There's something that's so interesting, and I think a lot of people experience, that you write when you are feeling really terrible, like as a way of, maybe you don't even know that you're doing it, it's subconscious. But I a couple of days ago was reading at a poetry event where the theme was queer joy, and I went through my poems being like, this is going to be easy, I don't write depressing stuff, and then I was like, oh, I actually have very little that is joyful. And I think if somebody gave me the brief to write a joyful poem, I would really struggle. Do you think the same?
My mum did say to me a few years ago, like, why can't you write about trees? But I have written like one queer joy poem, and it was really hard. I think it's like, I think it's really, really hard to write a love poem that isn't hack. But yeah, it did take me like 3 years to kind of pull it together. But it was very satisfying, and I'm also like, I'm just going to take me 3 years to write every poem from now on. But it is a lovely thing to do when you can access joy. I like it. It's cool.
Yeah. Joy is cool. Yeah.
I rate it.
So, Anthony, your book of interconnected short stories, Home Theatre, weaves seamlessly through genres and styles. From the, there it is. And also for sale at the table at the Women's Bookshop table at the back, as is Head Girl. From the historical fiction of a maybe haunted radio factory in the ether of 1939 to headlines ripped from gripes on online community pages in Being Neighbourly to the sci-fi elements of time travel and a glowing blue horse. Did you have to give yourself permission to switch genres like that?
The book began life as my master's thesis at the Institute of Modern Letters, and part of the task I set myself there was to sort of write in as many genres as possible to try and learn as much as possible, mostly just because my interests as a reader and a writer are quite restless. So I'm a very distractible kind of writer. But then, kind of all the good learning aside, I still kind of was conscious I had to write a coherent book. So part of that, I mean, the book centres around an apartment building, so that's kind of a natural structure for building some cohesion around, very convenient. So each kind of resident in that apartment building that I write about kind of has an appropriate genre sort of assigned to their story. And I wanted all of those characters and those genres to kind of sit productively alongside each other. And so in some cases, the genres kind of blend and mix together. The story you mentioned, The Ether of 1939, is one of the examples of that, where it's about a radio factory foreman in the 1930s who has to sort of solve this mystery broadcast that's coming over this new high-end radio, incidentally called the Home Theatre radio console. And it turns out that this sort of ghostly voice that's being heard is the voice of a time traveller from kind of our modern day. So it's sort of depending on the perspective of which character you're looking at, it's kind of a ghost story that's sort of solved by science fiction. But that foreman, Jack, is also a gay man living in the 1930s, i.e. pretty closeted and pretty limited in the options he's got to live the life that he would like to live. And the voice that he's hearing is one half of a gay couple living with considerably greater freedoms, kind of in the modern day, kind of relative freedoms, but considerably greater. And so there's kind of a genre shift there as well, where, as far as Jack's concerned, this voice that he's hearing is enacting a kind of complete fantasy that in the future is just a very boring kitchen sink kind of reality. So there's that kind of thing, I guess it's sort of repeating that idea of, you know, when does science fiction become science fact and so forth, and when do the sort of the social opportunities become something that's less fantastical and something that's more just sort of normal. So I was kind of interested in sort of tackling the idea of genre from those sorts of angles. Kind of the conception of genre I had when I was going in was that a genre is it's a belief about what you think a world contains and what and some kind of expression of that belief. And so that was the sort of the notion I was trying to explore, yeah.
What I really liked about that story is that the voice, the story can be read alone, and I think was published alone before the book.
A small segment of it was just the bit looking at Jack and his disintegrating relationship with his girlfriend at the time. So that was a sort of a short excerpt that was kind of printed, on the radio as kind of an historical realism thing. Yeah.
But equally, like so the whole story stands alone. But for me, I felt a lot of joy because the time travel character, is the main character of the first story in the book, and it was so, I was so fascinated by realizing what this voice was that came through the radio. And you're right, when Jack just overhears something that implies that the voice he's hearing is in a gay relationship, and it's just this sense of wonder for Jack. And I thought that was kind of told in a really joyful kind of way. It just you're talking about how all of the stories are linked together through the apartment building. Is that something that you began with, or is it something that you brought into the stories to kind of weave a few existing stories together?
No, it was something I began with. I think I had a few story ideas and thought, well, how can I bring these together? I really wanted to make. I wanted to have a space in which people sort of came and went and could sort of rub shoulders and that sort of easily, and where you could have some natural connections, and having an apartment building just sort of seemed like a natural solution to that requirement. But then once I sort of latched onto that early enough, it was a structure in which I could make a lot of the other stories. This sort of lent itself to finding new opportunities in the stories that came along. There's one story, for instance, about a mother who is recently-ish divorced, and she has a young son, and there's sort of a relationship that she forms with someone else in the apartment building, but her story kind of plays out across the breadth of sort of 3 other stories. So you kind of meet her at different points, and you find out how things are developing for her and her son at different points. So, and then there are other people who sort of just come and go, and you sort of barely know that they're part of the same building at all. So that kind of idea of sort of shifting proximities and that kind of the luck in terms of who you get to sort of meet and who you don't was kind of part of it as well. The sort of the flux of life, I guess.
Yeah, great. I am going to be asking Ray about the boundaries between fact and fiction and comedy, but before I do, I'm interested in all of your thoughts on the assumption that in certain forms, such as poetry and comedy, the reader or viewer often assumes that the speaker is the author, and that's something that I'm constantly telling my students about, like refer to, in your essays, refer to them as the speaker, not the author. But we make that assumption in comedy and in poetry that it is like a one-to-one relationship, and that's not necessarily an assumption that we make in kind of prose forms or novels and things like that. And I noticed myself, I had realized that I had made certain assumptions like that this morning, listening to Oscar Upperton talk about his book about James Barrie, and he said writing that book was having to write about something real for a change. And I was like, were the poems earlier not autobiographical? You just make that assumption. And I'm just interested in your thoughts on that, and whether it's true that in poetry the speaker is the author, or why we make those assumptions. Any thoughts?
I have a vibe on this that's to do with time, because I'm definitely always writing from a very personal perspective, but and for a while I was kind of like, no, you can think it's me, but I had a conversation with someone who said they felt like they knew me after reading the book. And at the time I was like, oh, great. And then my friend was like, that's actually disturbing and wrong. And I was like, oh, yeah, because I think the thing for me is that the book and each poem exists in a particular time, and it was what I needed to express from myself at the time, but you can't, that's not a whole person, and it's kind of dangerous to assume that it's a whole person. And also it's like, reading them now, it's like, oh, that's not me, that's someone stopped in the past. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so I'm kind of like, if it's personal, that doesn't mean it doesn't have all of me in it. And also it shouldn't. I don't think it should. The same friend who said that's disturbing told me that people don't read your poems to find out about you, they read them to find out about themselves. And I think it's important for that kind of self in time to be separated from me in order that people can see themselves in that self. Yeah. That's my
Ray?
take.
Ray, your thoughts?
I worked in a library for a time, and poetry is kept in the non-fiction section, which for a time, I was like, I don't know whether I quite shouldn't there be like a separate middle bit where it's like it's not quite fiction, but it's not quite non-fiction. There's the way we categorize things is very odd to me. But I feel like my answer is probably very contradictory, and I'm very interested in this, but I don't have anything I think. I don't know. We'll talk about this.
I get you. I feel like I feel you about this.
Yeah, and because I write like a lot of different things to varying degrees of success, I think that my answer is maybe different in stand-up versus poetry versus I'm starting to write little essays, and that's different again. And yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, from a fiction point of view, I feel like I've got it easy. I always, as a reader, I think I want to have the freedom to love or hate the characters for who they are, and to sort of read the story on the basis of its own kind of internal dynamics, and not worry about who the author was and what they said or did at what time and all that kind of stuff. I think, if I had to pass every author through a purity test, I'd probably never read any books. They're generally not very nice people, particularly the ones, born anything before sort of the 2000s. There's not a great history of amazingly polite, well-mannered authors. There are some. But as a reader, that's my relationship, and I really take what you say to Freya about you've got to give the reader space to bring their history and their knowledge and their experience to the work, because the work is for them in the end, and the book exists in the reader's mind. Like, you kind of put your little blueprint down and you give it to them, and then they have to kind of take that information and reconstruct everything in their own head with their own assumptions and their own imagery and their own thoughts, and kind of take that level of ownership of it. And if you try and control that too much, you'll take away that experience from the reader somewhat, but also you'll never succeed in controlling the meaning of something. It's just not possible. There's a great essay by Umberto Eco called The Guerrilla Warfare of Communications, or something like that. He's got a whole model about communications and about how meaning can be intercepted at any point, particularly by the receiver. It's a sort of a great semiotics essay if you're into stuff like that.
It is kind of interesting to see that people I've read a few I don't know, and it's just on Goodreads, so I don't know how much to take this, but people were starting to review fiction and critique the author for the opinions of the characters, or judge the author's sort of moral standing based on morally complex characters, and it's no, there is space for us to write about morally complex and potentially horrible people without that reflecting poorly on us. And I feel like there's a bit more of that happening at them, but maybe that's just what I'm reading. I don't know.
I wonder why have I picked up why did I pick it up? I was gonna talk. I think I have ADHD.
Do you want me to talk for a little bit until you remember what you were about to say?
Yeah. Maybe I just needed some attention for a second.
It's okay. You're on a stage right now. We can give you attention.
You could snatch back the attention any time. Yeah.
I think it's something interesting. In a lot of ways, I relate things about reading back to my work as a teacher, because I do have the privilege of introducing students to concepts about reading. And one of the stories that I'm doing at the moment with my Year 12 students, there's the protagonist of the story. It's The Devil Comes to Orokobo by David Benioff. The main character of the story is a young soldier who's treated very badly by the older soldiers that he's with, and we do feel quite sorry for him. But he also thinks and says some quite misogynistic stuff. And I'm talking to my students about how it's okay to have these characters that kind of live within that grey area, that you can feel sorry for them for some things and also dislike them for other things that they think, and that the misogynistic things that the characters say are no reflection of the, you know, potential misogyny of the author. And, you know, in the same way, people can have, like, the authors themselves can have truly horrible opinions about things, but their books don't necessarily contain those opinions and are beloved. So I think it's kind of, interesting.
Or maybe flavoured by them in some sort of ways that you can
Yes,
subtly
yeah.
detect at times.
Yeah.
I think the one thing I really like about, I do read a bit of poetry, but I can speak more to fiction, but one of the things I love about fiction is its ability to take a question and dramatise it, and show the complexity that hides behind, you know, most things that we come face to face with in a more superficial way. And I think you can't dramatise anything without introducing some level of complexity and therefore some level of griminess, you know.
Mm.
I sort of remembered what I was going to talk about, which was you were talking about kind of characters being able to be bad, and I think that for me, writing Head Girl, I really needed to be able to air a particular badness that I think comes across kind of, in a whole way in terms of it's a whole book, but it's not, it's only it's like a little sliver of my personality. But I remember at the time being like, I want people to believe that I'm bad. I was so depressed. But like, yeah, I don't know. That's what I was thinking about in terms of like letting the speaker inhabit one part of my personhood, which doesn't at all reflect the wholeness of it.
Yeah.
Just deeply intelligent, insightful.
I think it's all kind of interesting stuff to think about. I have a poem where the speaker mentions their brother, or the speaker mentions her brother, and I keep expecting somebody to ask me about my brother, which I don't have. I just, it's kind of something that's loosely based on something that happened on a family holiday, very loosely based. Like, there's a lot of fiction in the poem, and I'm expecting somebody to come up and ask me something about my brother, and having to say I don't have one. I made him up for the story, made him up for the poem. Yeah. So Ray, you work across forms in comedy and in written work, like For Experiments, which was published in Out Here, which is also on sale at the Women's Bookshop table down the back. And that story, For Experiments, ends on the wonderful lines, "Did you hear me?" The kid says, "Are you a boy or a girl?" X says, "Yes," and keeps walking, which I just thought was a beautiful way for that story to end. Is inspiration and your drawing on things that have happened to you, does your inspiration come from drawing on things that have happened to you, or like a combination of imagination and fiction? Is that different across different forms? Like, in comedy, is there more truth, and in writing, is there more fiction?
I'm not clever enough to be very fictional. Like, I don't have a very good imagination, I don't think. Like, I used to, like, in all my school reports when I was a kid, it's like very imaginative, and like, I don't know where that's gone. So everything that I sort of say on stage is a sort of exaggerated or heightened version of myself, So similarly, I find it very odd when people come up to me after a gig feeling like they sort of know a lot or get a good sense of who I am, because it's like a heightened or exaggerated version. And in reality, I'm a lot more kind of, I would say, reserved and anxious than I appear on stage, maybe. But all of the stories that I'm telling are true. But then it feels like like my mum. I joke a lot about my mum. I tell a lot of stories about my mum on stage, and she and I have had some quite at times difficult conversations about that, because to me the mum I am presenting on stage is also an exaggerated or like heightened version of her, but she for good reason, feels that reflects poorly on her sometimes. So that's very, but then, like, I feel like once I start writing things down, I'm a lot more invested in the truth. So for ages I was concerned that I hadn't written any of the stories that I tell on stage down, and so I started doing that. Whenever I thought up a new story and started telling it on stage, I would also try and write it as like an essay or a poem or a something, so that it existed in a physical form. And as soon as I started writing it, I would go, oh well, but that is not quite like exactly how it happened, so I can't put it on the page, which was a real sticking point for a long time, and it's sort of taken me a while to get used to the idea that the stuff that is, it feels more permanent, can also be playful and exaggerated and not necessarily true. Does that answer the question?
You can answer the question in any way you want to. So yes, it has answered
Hooray.
the question.
Well done, me.
You
yeah.
win.
I win.
You win at answering questions. And I can say that because I'm a teacher.
Thank you. Gold star.
There's some gold stars on the back of Freya's book, I think, but they don't peel off.
The intention was for them to look like they could peel off.
Yeah.
But they don't.
That'll be the special edition that comes out later.
Yeah.
Peel off stars that we can give to Ray. So in the blurb for this session, it instructed people to bring their notebooks. So I thought we would give them something to scribble down in their notebooks. There have been so many really wonderful and insightful things that have been said over the course of this panel, but I was wondering if you have any kind of final words of inspiration for budding writers out there. Anthony?
I had a teacher once called Erlis Hunter at a community class back in the day, who the one thing she said that really stuck with me was that writing never gets any easier, but you get better at it. So that was brilliantly double-edged. And I found that to be true, actually. One of the things I really like about writing is that it's a process of kind of continuous learning, kind of whether that's at like a craft level, or whether it's topical, or whether it's the things that you kind of discover about yourself as you go along. But I would just say embrace that challenge and keep learning, yeah.
I only quite recently discovered how freeing it is to only write for yourself. Like, I've always kept like haphazard journals and stuff, but as a kid I was very much like leaving them around, hoping someone would find them and publish them. But such a little asshole. But
aren't we all?
Yeah, we are. I have kind of started giving myself permission to just write for myself, and the way that I do that, because I think I need to be communicating when I write, or I feel like that, is to write to myself kind of in the future, because I'm the only one who's going to come back and read it, but I'm like, it's just for me. And that allows me to write really badly, and I think if you, like, because sometimes if you're not letting yourself write badly, you can't write at all, because you have to write a lot of bad stuff to get any good stuff out, I think, like, or at least I do. So yeah, I don't know. My advice is write as much bad stuff as you can, because eventually good bits will slide out in between. That's it. That's mine.
I don't know whether this is like advice, but this is the thing that I've taken away from this that I'm going to go and try and do more, is like on that joy thing of like not only writing when something dramatic or sad or something that could be dramatized, but also just to write about like the joy that I'm experiencing. I think that's quite nice, and I'm going to try and do that more. So I don't know if that's helpful for you, but it's helpful for me. Thanks.
That's really lovely. I was just thinking back to what I said earlier about imposter syndrome, which I have had a lot of in terms of giving myself permission to call myself a writer, which I now do. But I think like so much writing advice says to write every day. Like you have to write every day to be a writer, and I kind of want to give the opposite advice, which is it's okay to take really long breaks. And I'm currently, like whenever I take long breaks from writing, it's always unintentional. I'm currently hapu and I've not written a single word. Well, obviously I've written stuff, but I've not written anything that's like a poem or anything since then. All of my brain power has been on trying to like grow some bones inside of me that aren't my own bones. And when I do eventually start writing again, I'm going to be rusty and I'm going to be bad, but I have to give myself permission to take this break and then to be bad and then to write more and get better. It's kind of this like fluctuating process. And if you're okay with if I'm okay with being bad at it when I pick up a pen again, then I will get better again. Yeah. We have a little bit of time if there are any questions from the floor. I'm just going to repeat the question on the mic in case you didn't hear it. Would you get a agent, or did you say go straight to a publisher? Yeah. How would you kind of? Yeah. How did you get published?
I went to the Institute of Modern Letters like Anthony did, and I think like there's a little bit of part of that is the support that you have kind of from the community after that. And I don't know, I think that the big thing that I learnt then was that you kind of, particularly with poetry, at least need to be kind of getting things out in journals and getting people reading your stuff. And so that was what I was doing for a while. And then I don't have a literary agent. I basically just, I have friends who nepotized me. I don't know. Is that no? I don't know. Like because I was writing things, people were starting to take notice and asked if I was writing a book. And once I was asked if I was writing a book by a publisher, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm writing a book. So yeah.
From a fiction standpoint, I think generally if you're publishing, say, a novel or a collection in New Zealand, you don't generally need an agent. You can submit directly. Internationally, you tend to need an agent. That's kind of how the system works. I think if you're looking at Australasian publishing, an agent might be helpful. I think some Australian publishers will like to have the publishing rights in the domestic market as well as their own market, so an agent could be helpful there. But if you're just submitting fiction to just New Zealand publishers, you can just do it yourself. You don't need to bother with an agent too much. It can be helpful if you get one, but yeah.
I want to echo what Freya said, maybe because I am the editor of a literary journal, but please submit to literary journals. And there are queer lit journals in New Zealand. Mine is Overcom. I'm going to do a quick plug for myself. I've plugged everybody else. You can also grab copies of the latest 2 issues of Overcom in the back corner where, Liam's holding one up. So I publish every 6 months and am always taking submissions, and also have started a new online project as well. There's also the Agenda Zine, which publishes infrequently, but about every 1 or 2 years. Eel Mag has put out their first issue, and unsure currently if there will be a second issue, but it's eagerly anticipated if it is coming. And then Bad Apple is online, and they do publish poetry as well as reviews and things. So there are specifically queer spaces out there, and as an editor you get to know names that are out there, and so it may feel like publishing just for the sake of publishing, but it is really good to get your name out there. And it also feels really good when you're writing your bio and you can say so and so's writing has been published in, and then do a little bit of a list. It is a bit of a boost. That just because I edit a lit journal, it might just be me trying to plug my own stuff. But
I should probably add a correction to what I said too. I think I was talking in terms of full manuscripts. If you're just looking at submitting individual stories, for instance, then internationally You don't need an agent for that either. And actually, I'd encourage you to submit internationally as well as domestically. I think fiction has the trouble that actually there's often things like word limits. And so you might have 3 or 4 journals you could submit to, but only one of them accepts anything more than 4,000 words. So you're kind of forced to submit overseas into other avenues. So just always pay attention to that kind of stuff, and don't be shy about, leaving New Zealand with your work. If you need to. Good to have networks and support local publishing, but yes.
Great. To wrap up, again, I'd like to remind you about the Women's Bookshop at the table at the back. Writers are really honoured and pleased when you ask them to sign their work, so I can encourage you to grab a copy. So please peruse the books at the back. And please follow Same on social media. The Same Instagram page is genuinely brilliant. Follow it. There's always cool stuff on there. In the run up to this one, there were a ton of books that you could have won. So, and then plug this on social media so that your friends can find out about it as well. I would just like to personally and on behalf of the audience thank you three so much for your time and for sharing all of your wisdom with us today. Thanks.